Hello, Deborah. Thank you
Hello,
for joining.
Paul.
Thank you for joining me for this interview uh, for Innisfil Toastmasters. I really appreciate it, and it's a treat for me because I've been wanting to ask you all sorts of questions, but we never have the time to carve out an intentional discussion. So this is great. I have a bio in front of me, and we have a lot to cover. But I'm going to just jump right into a question that I'm fascinated with. 25 years in advertising. What was that like? Because even you mentioned last nine was with CBC television. And when I think of advertising, I think of Terry O'Reilly, Under the Influence. Well,
Mhm.
paint me a picture. What was working in advertising like?
Well, it was very different than I imagine it is now. I joined in the mid 80s and I actually started in accounting because that's what I was good at. I used to operate one of those old book making machines or bookkeeping machines. I call them making, but and I don't even have a deck of cards, but that's how they used to run them with punch cards. And you had to feed them into the bookkeeping machine, and that was the program. And I'll never forget one day working for a company called Avon Sportswear. If you ever had any team jackets, anything to do with Melton and leather, that's where they were made way back in the 70s and 80s. Anyways, one day I was starting off my program and I picked up the deck of cards and I dropped them.
Oh no.
So I couldn't work that day. Literally, I was just scrambling all over the place. So that's how it started. And then I moved into buying. I became an advertising buyer and bought media on behalf of my clients. And I had a lot of really interesting ones over the years. Molson Breweries, Canada Limited, MBCL stands out as one of the most memorable. And I worked on British Air. I worked on all kinds of different clients over the years, and then ended up at CBC in that position, more or less, running billing for 9 years for CBC television marketing and sales. But I also took on administrative in the last couple of years, administrative support. So from the 80s to I left in 2001, almost 20 years ago now, it really shifted and changed. It was the wild, wild west in the 80s. It was pretty crazy. Lots of deals done under the table, lots of things that probably weren't, very reputable back then. I met a lot of great people in the world. It was a very different world to work in. When I got into CBC, government run organization, Crown Corporation, there were a lot of rules, there were a lot of protocols, there were a lot of guidelines, and it was very different. And I often sum up my experience at CBC, Paul, by saying I survived two strikes,
Wow.
an employee takeover attempt in my own department in CBC television marketing and sales, and 9 years of hockey night in Canada. So
Yes.
that was fun. It was a great experience. I loved it. It was a lot of fun, and it was a great way to end a career in advertising. Was working for CBC, which I still support to this day.
That's amazing. When I think of advertising, I think of pitches, communication. Like it's a lot. You're trying to influence people, and yet you state, "quote it." You learned more about communication and leadership through Toastmasters, not the advertising, and that was a huge revelation to me. Please explain.
Well, when I joined Toastmasters in 2001, I was invited by a friend, and he said, "Come on out, you'll have fun, you'll meet some great people, and I think you'll fit right in, Deb, because you've got the skills for it." Well, I walked into that room, which was Towns of York in Aurora, and I looked around at, there were probably about 60 people in that room, Paul, and for a Toastmasters club, that's pretty big. And every table had a white linen tablecloth on it, and everything was set up beautifully. There was, paperwork, and I don't think there was name cards, but there might have been back then. It was very formal, and I thought, oh, wow, this is quite the place. But, I know how to speak and I know how to communicate because I had spent many years convincing clients like Molson that mine was the best campaign and they should buy it, lock, stock, and barrel. And in that first year, boy, did my head spin, Paul, because I saw communication and leadership skills like I'd never seen before. And I had been trained by internal consultants. I had been trained at the Canadian Management Center, York University. I'd been trained by a lot of experts when I was in my corporate career. But what I saw at Toastmasters really changed my perspective of what communication and leadership skills are. And that stayed with me over the years. That really stayed with me. And I think that, we know that those are the two pillars in the Toastmasters program. But again, I walked in there feeling, and I think many people feel that way when they walk in, feeling that they know what it's like to communicate clearly and to lead confidently. Nope. I did not know, at least from a Toastmasters perspective. I had my own set of ideas. But over the years, I really have learned more about those two pillars and how to use them. And I went on in my bio to say how I use them. And I'll let you ask those questions rather than jump ahead, Paul. This is an interview after all. Did I answer your question though?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
Good.
it's quite a testament, I thought, that Toastmasters elevates communication. Even though you were in, I would consider communication industry, it's still a testament to Toastmasters program, and especially the feedback I imagine you received. Okay, so you got the bug of Toastmasters, but that wasn't enough. You had to go all the way in, and you now have. I always like to mention this later on in the interview. DTM.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean, or what does it mean to you to have a DTM?
I think a lot, Paul. It took me a long time to get there. And I think Annette in her interview mentioned that some people can do it in, well, I met a person who did it in 1 year, 9 months, and 16 days. I don't know how she did it, but she did it. And we know DTMs that have, and DTM stands for Distinguished Toastmaster. We know DTMs who have multiple DTMs. I've met many in the Toastmasters community, but the truth is, and I think Annette mentioned this, less than 2% of all Toastmasters reach their DTM. People come in for, you've heard the expression, a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I guess I'm a lifer. I was kind of touched when I first entered that Towns of York meeting, and somebody looked at me and said, "Oh, you're going to be in it for a while. You're going to go a long way." And she was right. I didn't believe her at the time, and I didn't understand what DTM meant. I didn't know anything. When you first join Toastmasters, you don't understand that there are so many other levels and so many other paths. Now, we're talking about the legacy program. So I had to complete my CTM, my Confident Toastmaster, my bronze, my silver, my gold. That was the communication track. Then the leadership track involved high performance leadership projects, serving the district. In this case, I was area director, and several other in the old track, several other accomplishments in order to lead up to the DTM. I got that about 5 years ago, and it took me a long time considering I was in Toastmasters for 15 years. I kind of didn't really worry about that so much. I was competing, I was judging, I competed a lot, Paul. I loved competition. And
Why
that's
did you
another
like
thing I think.
why did you like competition? Because some people it just gravitates them, and other people they shy away from it. What is it about competition that you love so much?
It's a good question. I was pushed into competing very early on in my Toastmasters career because people just said, "Hey, Deb, you've got great evaluation skills. You should try evaluation." So I did. I tried evaluation. I tried international. I tried table topics. I tried a few different contests until I figured out that I was going to face my fiercest foe. There you go. There's some alliteration for you. I hated Table topics. I hated it with a passion. And anytime the meeting, moved into table topics, I was like in that back corner somewhere, hoping that nobody was going to look at me and nobody was going to call on me. And that was 2001. When I joined 2007, I just kept going. I kept going from club to area to division to district. And I surprised myself because I think it pushes you out of your comfort zone. As they used to say in towns of York, you got to get out on those skinny little branches in order to really test your mettle and figure out what it's a rush. I mean, I think it's a rush for a lot of people. It's an adrenaline rush, but it's also testing your own limitations. I never, ever thought I would compete. I never thought that I'd judge. I never thought that I would run contests and stand up in a room full of people. That was not me growing up. So I think you have to prove to yourself that you're capable of that, to keep going. And I had a lot of mentors. I had a lot of people pushing me from behind and encouraging me. And that's one thing that Toastmasters does really well. We are a safe learning environment. We always say that. But we're also an environment where people will push you to go beyond your limits when they see something in you. You just have to pay attention. And mentors and mentees is a really great part of the program as well. So I've taken this into a bit of a different direction, Paul, and I'm hoping I answered your question, but I really think it's just getting out on those skinny little branches and really testing what you're capable of. And the rush helps too. It's a lot of fun when you win.
That I've participated in a few contests, and it was a love-hate. It was like, oh, this is so nerve-wracking, and yet I can feel myself getting more polished. And you're right, there's something about pushing yourself beyond what you think you're capable of. And once you get past that point, you're like, oh, what other barriers are there? I have to say, I'm just going to compliment you now. When I first joined Innisfil Toastmasters, I was just captivated by your poise. And I'm always fascinated, or I should say I'm captivated by those that are captivating. When you speak, people listen. You command the room. And I was really paying attention. What is it? And obviously I've gathered some clues just over the years, or I should say in the short time that I've been a member. But I was really fascinated. You said you pursued your passion. You went to the I'm going to say this correct, the prestigious Protocol School of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I know what it is, but I want to hear it from you. What is it, and why was it a dream to pursue this?
Well, after I left CBC, I had a summer of navel gazing. I don't know if you've ever had one of those summers before. Most people don't have the luxury, but I did. Because of my family and friends, I was able to spend some time figuring out what I really wanted to do. And I have always wanted to study protocol and etiquette. My great uncle was a diplomat, and he was a diplomat. He was a Canadian High Commissioner in what was then known as Sri Lanka, or Ceylon, what was then known as Ceylon. And he was also stationed in South Africa. So I grew up with these stories swirling around of his life, and it sounded so romantic. I probably had as a child a romanticized idea of what it was like to be a diplomat, to work in the world of protocol. And my grandmother had a huge influence. I mean, she brought me up quite a bit. And she was very much a proper, I'm not going to say British, but she certainly had that background. She was Canadian, and she brought me up to learn how to pour tea and set a table and greet people. And she taught me about she gave me a lot of social capital, actually, as a young girl. I didn't even know what that meant, and many people still don't. But my dream was to go and study with this founder of the Protocol School of Washington. So when I had the opportunity, I seized it. Things just fell into place. It was kismet, Paul. And I think, as I said in my bio, 2 months after 9/11, I just drove down. I borrowed my mom's little Honda. I didn't even have a car. And I drove down to Portland, Maine. At the time, that's where the school was located. And I studied under the founder. And she was a pretty phenomenal woman. She started the school to teach diplomatic wives how to behave at formal functions in military, in the world of military, which is very different than a public or social world. And I came out of that school understanding a little bit more about how social capital works, what it is, and how protocol and etiquette is the basis for every civil society.
Oh my goodness. I'm getting shivers. I'm getting shivers. All right. The meat and potatoes. We're going to get into this. We may circle back if I can think of some other clever questions here. So you went to this, you got this prestigious training. You have a career in advertising. You've have Toastmasters. You also are a self-published author. Sorry, you are not self-published. You are a published co-author of the book "The Power of Civility."
Mhm.
What all these pieces? I'm trying to think. Was Toastmasters just help flourish out of all these areas, or did they contribute to each other? Because I think a lot of people think when they get into Toastmasters, I just want to get over my fear of speaking. If I can do that, I'm good, and then I'll leave. And not realizing that there's more gold beneath the surface. How has Toastmasters, in your experience, contributed to all this other skill sets that you've had in your life?
I think it's been the center of pretty well everything I've accomplished since I left my corporate career. And that sounds like quite a lofty statement. When I studied in November of 2001, I had just joined in July. I didn't really understand the entire world of Toastmasters and what it could do for me. But I had enough under my belt to understand that the skills I had before, and everybody who walks in the door as a brand new Toastmaster has a set of skills. So the skills I had before and the skills I was about to develop in that time in November of 2001, 20 years ago, I think I started to understand how it's like a puzzle, how those pieces of the puzzle would fit together. I've always said that we need to understand that everybody has a different agenda when they walk through the door. And those skills that you bring with you are valuable and valued. We just need to kind of tease them out a little bit. And as I went forward, I started one company and then I started another. I did training. I decided that, you know what, I need a little bit more in my education. So I went back to school. I got my adult education certificate from Georgia. That took me 5 years, but I did it. All that time, Toastmasters was kind of, ticking along in the background. Not that I wasn't very present in it. I was. It was always there, Paul. It was always there so that I could come back to it or use it or contribute to it or data mine it or develop relationships and friendships through it. It was the mainstay of pretty well everything I've done over the last 20 years. I didn't know that when I started, and I don't think most people do. And you're right, people come in and say, I just need to deliver a speech at my son's wedding, and then I'm out of here. Okay, we respect that. That's great. You do what you need to do. You have your own agenda. But I think you're right. There's so much more to it if we'd only just give ourselves the time and the commitment and the interest, because you have to be interested in something to keep going. And as this program unfolded like a flower in front of me, I realized that there was so much more to it. And I needed to give myself the time and the level of commitment to explore it. And that means, the leadership track and the old program, the communication track and the leadership track lead you to the same destination. They lead you to a DTM. Pathways is not that much different. You're going to get there. It's just a little bit of a different track, and it's a single track for the most part, but it is the same concept. if you want to get through all of those levels, if you want to go through right to the top of that path, you have to make that commitment first to yourself, and then to the program, and then to your club. And I think that answers your question, Paul. I hope it does.
It does. It does. I have to say, it was a few years ago now, I was area director. I had just finished being club president. So I was used to the officer training. You'd go to the local officer training and you'd learn how to be a club president. And then
Yep.
when I went to do the area training, they did the same thing. They gathered us all together. They gave us the training to give us the skill sets. And they said at the higher levels, what do? They bring them all together. They go through the same training. They pretty much indicated to me, if you can master this level, you can move up to the next level. You can master that, and you can get all the way to the top if you so choose to become an international executive for Toastmasters International, if that's your desire. But the point is, they will hold your hand. You just have to follow the program. You just have to have the commitment. You just have to show up, and doors will open. And I thought, wow, this is. I was always under the impression, no, you have to have. I don't know what I thought. There was all these barriers, but really, no. It just takes someone's determination, and so it's refreshing. It's refreshing, yeah, to hear some verification. I did want to ask you this question. Well, more of first of a comment. These days, they have to force kids to do 40 hours of community service. They have to volunteer before they graduate. They have to force kids to do it. In your bio, this is one of your passions. You love to volunteer. You volunteer at the Alzheimer's Society of Simcoe County. In fact, you actually won 2 awards. You received the award from MP Brassard, Barrie Innisfil, and Town of Innisfil Community Volunteer of the Year Award. I don't suspect they hand those out to just anybody. Why is volunteering such a passion for you?
I think it probably came, if I go far enough back, it came from my grandmother, that same one who taught me how to pour tea and what social capital was all about at the age of 6. She was a philanthropist. She did a lot of volunteering for the Toronto Symphony and the Canadian Opera Company. We lived in Toronto growing up. And I think I saw that, children, the adage, children learn what they live. I saw that at a very early age, and I realized how important it was to use your skills to give back, to do good, to be better, and to make things around you better. That's the basis of every civil society. And when we forget that, when we forget to pay it forward or give it back or whatever term you want to use, that's when things start to implode and collapse. It's important to me to be a part of my community. I was a go animal for many years. And that, with all due respect to the go, commuters, and I didn't know, I knew my neighbor to the north, I knew my neighbor to the south, and that was it. We didn't know anybody else because we were on the 6:47 train out of Newmarket every morning and crawled home at 6:00 at night. So commuting can kill any kind of volunteerism in a community. I get that. When I had the chance to be a part of a community and to be, and again, it was because of my lifestyle and my chosen passions, I was able to give back to the community. And again, it's a way to use Toastmasters skills, Paul, and again, to challenge your own self-limiting beliefs, or self-limiting beliefs, rather. Just made up a word. And that to me is a way to be a better civilian, if you will, in a civil society. We live in very, closed down lives. And yes, the pandemic has exacerbated that, unfortunately. But I think when we have an opportunity to do something, to use the skills, as I say, to make yourself better and things around you better, or to give back in some way, I think we have a civic duty and responsibility to do that. And I understand that not everybody can do that. Years ago, I took a volunteer management program, and I was on the board for Ladies of the Lake, as a matter of fact. And I learned that volunteerism is deeply rooted in reciprocity. So reciprocity is, what do I get back if I give you this? And I understand that completely. We all like that. It's a basic human need. I have to see some gain for me in order to give you something. So even if it's just an hour of volunteering a month, you can join an organization that is going to give you or feed your soul, feed your skill set, feed your knowledge, feed whatever it is, or it could literally feed you. That is such a rush. That is such a wonderful feeling when you're able to volunteer and see a difference and make a difference. Although I think you can make a difference doing just about anything if you put yourself out there in a community. And my volunteerism is a very big part of who I am. I learned it from my grandparents. I learned it from my parents, and even from my sisters. We all do it because we get so much back. We are so much richer for what we give.
I think I've asked all my questions. Just trying to think. This is such a great opportunity. What I'm really impressed with, the reason I first came to your club was I was trying to get something for me. I was trying to get a club coaching acknowledgement as part of my pathway towards DTM. But I decided to stay with the club because I was so impressed with the evaluations, both from yourself, Nicole, Lorraine, some of the other members. They were giving such a high level of evaluation I wasn't seeing at other clubs, especially your evaluations. How did you accumulate this skill, or what do you listen for, or how could I become a better evaluator?
Those are really good questions, Paul. Thanks for the compliment, and thanks for asking them. I always say to people, and I think I put it in my bio, that listening has its own superpower. If you can be fully present in the moment, the 5 to 7 minutes in this case, or whatever it is in a speech, if you can be fully present, give yourself to that speaker, listen for key things. So key things meaning whatever the criteria might be for the speech project, what the speaker has asked you to listen for, what your expectations of that speech or speaker might be. There's a lot of different criteria in evaluating a speech, but more than anything else, you've got to be committed to it. I always say I'm very lucky because I'm an auditory learner. So I think I pick up on things that other people do not. And I'm completely fascinated with your interview technique because I've always wanted to do this. I think it's really cool to have that superpower. You have to be a good listener. So evaluation is, and I've taught evaluation workshops before, in a nutshell, listen, learn, and make sure you give feedback to the speaker that makes them bloom, not wilt. The last thing you want to do is discourage a speaker from delivering their next speech, and the one after that, and the one after that. We're here to support each other, to help each other move forward as speakers and communicators. Giving critical feedback, but couching it in such a way that you are giving key points for that speaker to use moving forward is the basis of a good evaluation, in my opinion. Remembering always to make that speaker bloom, not wilt.
No, I love that. And I can't agree more with that statement. I have to I have to let you give me the final words here. I love this quote. You left at the end here, and I've heard you say this different times at different meetings. I think these days people can just say whatever, whenever, and the attitude is a little bit like, it doesn't matter. What would you say to a person like that?
Well, I disagree. I think that we live in a society where people say just about anything to anyone at any time, anywhere. And we, again, being an auditory learner, I've learned that words matter deeply and that I will take to heart something that someone has said to me that has been hurtful or overly critical or not particularly kind. Not everybody's like that. Some people can just brush it off and water off a duck's back. But you don't know how words can change someone's life and how your actions can change someone's life until you see that or hear that years later. I remember getting a card from one of the young women that I mentored at Towns of York. It was actually a thank you card in which she said, "You'll never know how much you've helped me, Deborah. And I value our mentoring relationship, and it has helped me in numerous ways," or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But I will never forget those words because something I said or did helped set her on a path, on a more confident path or a more comfortable path. And our words matter, our actions matter, and what we do matters. And more than anything else, commitment matters. And I'm committed to Toastmasters. I'm committed to helping people in Toastmasters. I'm committed to helping myself in Toastmasters. That's why I'm still in it, because I'm still getting something from it and I'm able to give back. That matters.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you for chartering this club. I should have mentioned that at the top there. You helped charter Innisfil Toastmasters. We have a thriving, we're often referred to as the small but mighty club. And I can't thank you enough for being a huge part of it. So thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thank you, Paul. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for offering. And we'll see you at the meeting next week.
Sounds good.
Thanks again, Paul.